106 FM רדיו הר הצופים.
Hello, brothers and sisters in Israel. This is Chris Goss from Masters of Reality. You're listening to Jekyll and Hyde. Lots of love.
This is Oren Siegel speaking. Is this Chris Goss?
Yeah, hi, Oren. It's Chris.
Hi, Chris. This is Oren and Oded from the Jekyll and Hyde show.
Great.
All right. I want to talk about. Let's start with basically the last thing that the Masters have put out, the Pine Cross Dover. Mm-hmm. You were on a 5-year hiatus, if we can call it, from writing any new material for a while. What made you want to sit down and write new material during that time?
Well, first, I'm always writing new material in one form or another for either Masters of Reality or a number of side projects that I do. But, you know, as a writer, I really have no choice than to write all the time. It's a matter of putting it aside or placing the music that I write into the particular category and or outlet to release it in. I do a lot of writing with the bands that I produce also. So when it's a Masters of Reality record, I usually start compiling quite a bunch of material that I think is appropriate for Masters, and that I can envision that would go fit better with what we do. And so it comes the time comes around when my drummer, who lives in New York City, and I live in the desert in Joshua Tree, California, that I start to get antsy and want to perform my own music, and called John Leamy and said, "Let's do a record." And so he flies out, and we usually record in the desert, and that from the amount of material that that's piled up for a few years, and it could be some lyrics written on a napkin to start a song, to a particular drum beat that I sang into my tape recorder or into my digital recorder, just little bits and pieces that I start to accumulate over a number of years or months or whatever, and we take it from there. It goes right from a very small idea, and then we jam on it and expand on it, and so it's a really quick, natural process, and it's which I think benefits the music. It keeps it fresh. I don't tend to. I don't know. Maybe I learned a lesson. I don't mess with it too much. You know what I mean? We record it. If it grooves, if it sounds good, then it's a go, and we take it from there. But it's not like some bands take 5 years to record a record, and they actually write for 5 years. And a lot of brilliant bands like Massive Attack will take 5 years to put in between records, and they're actually sitting at their computers for a lot of that time, putting together music for quite a long time, and then the result is their next record. Well, John and I have come up with this technique now that we've been doing for quite a few years, where it's a matter of 6 or 7 weeks to complete what we feel is a presentable record.
So you basically give yourselves a deadline of some sort, and you decide that by then you don't want to play around with it too much, so as to not lose the freshness of it and the groove that's behind it. Yeah,
and there's time constraints on both of us, because we both have lives on different sides of the country, right. And also I think rock and roll is an art form that was made to be done quickly. It's kind of if you had to put it next to any other art form, it's like a Jackson Pollock technique of making music, and that's what makes it different from classical music or music that's very defined and constructed. Not that ours isn't, but it's just the spirit of rock and roll that gives us that license to get it done that quickly.
And you mentioned living in the desert. Does the place influence you? I mean, it sounds like the place is the opposite of like living fast
of the cliched rock and roll life.
Yeah, of like living fast and doing like you describe rock and roll. You know.
Absolutely, it's a great balance to live in the desert and be a musician who travels and produces and spends a lot of time in large metropolitan cities that are noisy and hectic and fashion oriented. Mm-hmm. When I get home, I get to shed that armor that you need for that lifestyle. And I live in a very rural area and wide open, wild desert, and it's completely silent at night. Mm-hmm. And I can see the Milky Way above in the sky and see millions of stars at night. And all I can hear really are my ears ringing from the work that I've been doing. And so it's a great lifestyle, actually. It's a balance that I've been in the desert for almost 20 years now, and have and a lot of people told me, well, how can you have a music career, and live out there? Well, I've managed to do it, and it's actually enhanced my career quite a bit. And what's happened is that now a lot of bands that I work with want to come here to record, and which has made it convenient for me, and also has influenced their music as well. There's quite a horizon here, and I'm sure a lot of listeners in your area who live in rural areas of the desert will know what I mean. That you almost, there's a solace to be found in rugged landscapes. And it also, I think, forces you to think beyond, traffic and pedestrian noise, and it takes your mind somewhere. I think maybe I don't know, not to sound too profound, but I think you get a bit closer to God when you're in a rural area.
I agree in reference to the fact that you're so in such a way so secluded and separate from what modern society tells you your life should be. Now we talked before about the fact that you said that you don't really have a lot of time to work on the masters, and when you decide you stop everything else, that sort of gave us an introduction to the fact that you are, and I don't know if you agree, but I would definitely say quite a music workaholic. When do you usually produce records for other bands, or you worked mostly with Goon Moon and Masters of Reality, of course? Which do you enjoy more, producing or writing music?
They're actually it's to me it's the same thing. Slightly different in the fact that when it's my music, I have the final say, but it's always a team effort. And when I'm in the studio, either with Masters of Reality or another band, a long time ago, I came up with a slogan, if you will, that said, the only boss in the studio is the song, and we're here to serve the song. And so, in that sense, whenever we're in the studio with anyone in any situation, the song that's being worked on is the focus, and it's such a great point of intensity to work under. When you love your work as much as I do anyway, that, I mean, bombs could be going off outside, and if someone's singing, or someone's playing or making music, you shut out that world because you have that. You're doing something that may not ever have a chance to be done again the same way, and so you're able to zero in on creating this piece of art that you have this one moment to capture. And so I love that point of focus and that intensity, that we have a job to do, and to serve that song that we're working on. And so no matter what's going on in the outside world, you've got to stay at it. And I suppose that applies to any occupation that or any lifestyle that someone loves and you're committed to. So in that sense, working on other people's music or my own is that exact same feeling. And especially with when I'm working with an artist that I really respect and that is great to work with, then it's just a sheer pleasure, and I forget everything else that's going on, and I really love that. It's an escape, I suppose. I guess there's a hedonistic part of it too, but that's the way it is. It's a commitment.
Do you consider this a job, or do you find it's surprising that you're able to basically consider producing bands and writing and putting out your own music a job? And do you find yourself still fortunate, or are there still some days that you say, "Oh God, I have to work with this band again," or I really feel like staying at home in the desert and taking it easy for a while?
Well, it's how you define job, I suppose. I mean, you could say that a person who's say leading a monastic lifestyle, they feel they have a job to do, and that job may be praying all day. Mm-hmm. It's an obligation to the art form. I do look at it as a privilege of what I do. It's a very unusual job. All the time in the studio, like I turn to people and say, "Look what we do for a living." It's the strangest way to make a living. It really is.
It's very fortunate.
Yeah, of course. And there's other times though that I wish that I had, sometimes a regimented lifestyle, and that I could come home at 5:00 and leave my job back at the office, like a lot of people do. Because I think when you're an artist, your mind never stops. You roll over in the middle of the night with ideas and while you're sleeping. And you tend to be analytical of every situation that you're in, to not to what it is but to what it could be. Whether you're, at a restaurant enjoying a meal or watching a film, there's always, I call it the curse of art, that you're constantly analyzing and comparing and thinking what you would do as an artist in this situation instead. So there are pluses and minuses to it, like everything else. But I think it's a tightrope walk for me, and I think for all artists to keep a mindset that to not fall off on either side of being too obsessed, too prolific, or To be honest with you, I'm a very lazy guy. It looks like I'm a prolific worker by all the records that I put out and by all the records that I work with. But I work very quickly, and so I do have a lot of time to watch a lot of TV. I'm a TV generation victim.
Can you find any barrier between your so-called job and your personal life, or do you feel like you are kind of living a holistic life, as in you are what you do?
I am what I do. It crosses over into my personal life every minute of my life, and that that it's a mood swing dilemma at times, and my mind may not be where everyone else wants it to be at any particular moment. So I can't imagine living with me, to be honest with you.
What do you usually do on your time off when you don't work then?
Think about what I want to do, and what kind of work, and I guess on to the next. I don't know. I guess maybe vision's the word, and also, probably like everybody else in the world, spend a lot of time disturbed at the chaos that surrounds us, and analyzing that and trying to make sense of it and where it may lead to, and trying to remain astute and protect myself and my family from it. The same concerns I think that everyone thinks about, whether it's the plumber or the electrician or whatever you do for a living. I think there at some point, all people are want to survive with some sort of security and happiness, and so I'm no different from anyone else in that aspect. So I'm probably just as frustrated about many things as everybody else.
Spirit of the planet of time, spirit of the wandering ways, the last city of the skies, the gates of the secrets of time, spirit of the wandering ways, the last city of the skies, spirit of the planet of time, the gates of the astral gods, spirit of the planet of time, the last city of the skies. Eats cake with a rake, eats rice with his toes, ate his children up too, as everyone knows. Don't fuck with his trailer, don't look at his nose, hit his Mary Lou, burned his fire hose.
Regarding producing, how do you what stands behind the decision to work with a certain band and to give up the choice to work with another?
Well, their music has to move me, and it's very rarely that I am moved by other people's music. There's some music that just makes me move immediately, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's it rings true, or it swings in the right way, or there's a talent. I work with a lot of younger artists, maybe perhaps proteges, and there might be something that I'm hearing in there that no one else is, and so I'll dedicate a lot of time to people who are just starting out, and giving them a hand with their music. A lot of charity music work, I suppose, and a lot of it never gets heard. But yeah, I have to believe in it. I have to love it. It has to move me, and especially it has to make my body move. You know what I mean? It's got to have soul and swing, and that's the key. If it's too mechanical, or if it's cold, I get turned off right away. Or if it's too derivative of what's on the radio. I mean, American rock radio is almost unlistenable, and at the moment. And I suppose over the years, Radiohead doesn't have number one singles here. Maybe not anywhere, but I mean, it's hard to find intelligent music on the radio here, and it's there's a tsunami of shit, really. That these Disney kids who are groomed to be pop stars now, and who can't really sing, and their vocals are tuned by computer, and they're the little robots who are sent out to sell millions of records and make a bunch of money for a corporation. There's a lot of that going on more than ever, and that's frustrating when I see so many great musicians who aren't working, whose music isn't being enjoyed by a lot of people. So I forgot what the question was, but I think what makes me like something is it's hard. It's impossible to put into words, really, I think.
You said that it has to move you. It has to have a certain groove and soul. Is it something that happens sometimes that you approach a band rather than they approach you to produce them or give them advice of sort? It's there's some bands that I'll come across that I really love that I feel like I need to step in, that I think out of fear that someone else might ruin it. Kyuss was a good example of that. They first saw them in 1990, and I wasn't known as a producer at that point. I was in the middle of making a record with Ginger Baker, and when I saw Kyuss play, I felt that they were so original and so good that I didn't want some idiot metal producer at the time. This is in 1990 to come in and make them tune up properly and structure their songs more commercially, and because it was perfect the way it was. And so that was the first time I stepped forward and said, come to the studio with me, and I actually went to the record label
And it was at the time when Cristo and Jean-Claude were doing the umbrellas in California, the umbrellas exhibition, where there was miles and miles of the yellow and blue umbrellas that they put along the freeway in Southern California, Central California. And I told, and the record label wanted to speak to me when I stepped forward about producing Kyuss, and they said, well, how do you plan on approaching the band on this? And I said, well, I'd love them to take them up to see Cristo's umbrellas that were stretched along these giant 20-foot umbrellas stretched along the freeway for miles. I bring the band to see them, to show them that you can do art on a worldwide scale that is intriguing and beautiful and big, and not be ashamed of it, and not be ashamed of its largeness. The band was very adamant and independent at the time, and they almost feared success and feared being commercial, and they were very, 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 I'm looking for the word, like rebels,
Mm-hmm.
and they were afraid that someone would take them and ruin what they were doing by making it commercial. And I think Cristo was a great example of an artist who could do beautiful installations and that are on a worldwide scale, and they get the attention of the world press, and they're historical in their scope, and but yet are so pure in their intent and actually perfect art, So sometimes you have to go in a roundabout intellectual manner,
Mm-hmm.
To get people to go along with your vision,
And when you heard them back then, have you envisioned them gaining such success as they had in the early days?
Oh yeah. I think they actually they could have been the biggest heavy band in the world. They were so adamant about not selling out
Mm-hmm.
that they turned down a lot of tours,
Mm-hmm.
and to their own detriment. They were offered to open for Metallica on a U.S. tour.
Really?
And this was the moment when Metallica had begun to turn into a stadium band.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Kyuss turned it down because they didn't want to be considered a heavy metal band.
Mm-hmm.
So there were commercial decisions that they couldn't be talked out of because, they were, like I said, young and rebellious and at times stupid. and so my attitude was, well, no, go open for them and blow their ass off the stage, because they could have. They were so good at that point that they could have just blown Metallica away. And so I think that it's not just what happens in the studio. In order for a band to be big, a lot of ducks need to be lined up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that saying is applicable to where you are, but it's kind of a way of saying, it almost has to be a perfect storm of events.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a great manager, a great agent, a great label that's behind you, musicians who will go along with the plan. It's just like this perfect timing thing. When Nirvana hit, for some reason, everything was lined up perfectly. The stars were in line for that band to just pop so gigantic so quickly. And so there's these things that happen that create a hit record that are, you think you can have the best plan in place, and still, if one factor is off, it won't work. So you have to be very lucky to strike it rich in this business. And like I said, a lot of different factors need to be in a perfect position for it to happen.
Doesn't matter how or why, 'cause either way you lose, yeah.
Yeah, and we have also discussed Kyuss with Brant Bjork a few months ago, and he said that one of the reasons for the decline of the band were a lot of inside conflicts. Do you think that this is the reason why Masters of Reality is basically a one-person
mainly a one-person
one-person band?
Even though you've worked with John Leamy on quite a few, obviously.
In comparison, and what did Brant say? I missed that.
He mentioned a few inside conflicts inside Kyuss that also made the band not work eventually.
No, there's no conflicts inside Masters of Reality. I think the conflicts are just timing and commitment to on my behalf to promote a record for a year, and not go into the recording studio with an artist that I want to work with, and so on this record in particular, I think I've come to grips with about 20 years of Masters of Reality songs right now, and that many of them which have never been performed live before. We've toured successfully in Europe regularly, but touring the States is much more difficult. So I've avoided it, and I suppose I've taken the path of least resistance. But no internal conflict here at all, really, other than scheduling and budgets and the cost of touring, and I suppose the having a team of people who make it happen for me. And I'm recently have acquired very good management, and which is in this business, for anyone who wants to get into this business, that's the hardest piece of the puzzle, is finding great management. A manager who understands your vision and how to sell it. Everybody talks a good game, but very few people follow through with their actions. And so I've recently acquired a manager who I think is going to serve Masters of Reality very well, and also an agent who would could team up with the label, the management agent, your booking agent, everybody to work as a team to get something accomplished. That's something that we've lacked in the past, as a cohesive team of people. But internal conflict, no, none at all. I'm very lucky that the people that I play music with, there's a lot of mutual respect going on, and they know when Masters of Reality is the focus, then they'll pretty much conform to that, which and it's not really any kind of a constraint, because I like a lot of freedom in the band. I don't over rehearse the band before touring. I like to keep things very loose and dangerous, and that makes for a better show. And where there's a tension there that subconsciously with the audience, when you're not over rehearsed, where the band sounds like it may fall apart at any moment. I think some of my favorite musicians, like Led Zeppelin, had that quality where you weren't sure if they were going to where they were going, or where the song would end up. There was a lot of improvisation involved, and that's the way I do live shows too.
what are some of your favorite songs to play live? Because you said you don't play all. Some songs were never played on any tour.
Mm-hmm.
So the songs that you probably choose to play live are dearer to you.
Well, ones I've done in the past that are my favorites, or ones that I would like to do. Which ones?
Let's start with the ones that you've done in the past.
Well, I've always loved to do the Blue Garden off of the first album.
That's also a crowd pleaser, I'll bet.
I'm sorry?
I said that's also a crowd pleaser, I'll bet.
Yeah, and the song has evolved since it's first been written too.
Right.
And it can change every night. That's always a great song to play. There's a tension and a building in that song that never seems to fail and is always intriguing to play.
Mm-hmm.
I like to play Dorodina's Prophecies. There's a carnivalesque feel to that song.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I'm trying to. There's a lot of songs going by my head right now. There's a lot of acoustic songs actually and softer songs that I like to play. Some of the things off Sunrise on the Suffer Bus. Jody Sings, 100 Years of Tears on the Wind. They're kind of melancholic and I can have the ability to bring those songs down to a whisper level live, and then build them back up again. I really like to use dynamics live, and so I suppose those songs I mentioned, and let's see what else. What I'm trying to think what other ones in the past.
Have you ever only gone on an acoustic based solo, not solo, but an acoustic based concert tour, or have you done a mixed show as often as possible?
Well, I have done an acoustic promo tour in Europe, where I did small club performances and radio stations with just myself and acoustic guitar. This tour. We're going to do some shows in the States in November, and there will be an acoustic segment of the show. I really love doing that, and to change the dynamic for a part of the show. So it'll always be a part of what I do when I can do it. When you're playing festivals, and that's the thing these days, is that festivals are a quick way for great exposure to a lot of people, and in Europe in the summertime there's a festival somewhere every day practically, from June through August, and you get thrown on stage to play for 45 minutes in front of 50,000 people, and it's hard to do an acoustic set under those conditions. It's hard to do one acoustic song under those conditions. It's basically who can play loudest and the most intense in that small period of time you're given. So that's really unfortunate in a way. My favorite era of music, I can pinpoint it down to 1973, actually, where anything went, where, at that one moment in time, you had, Led Zeppelin at the top of their game, David Bowie at the top of his game, jazz fusion at the top of its game, a lot of acoustic and I suppose California rock at the top of its game, glam rock. It was the Rolling Stones, funk, was beginning to flower at that point. It was like everything was flowering in that 1 year, and anything went, and so there that having lived in that era, and I started going to concerts when I was 6 years old.
What was your first concert?
The Rolling Stones.
Oh, wow.
All right. Yeah, 1967.
That's cool.
When I was 8 years old.
That's great.
Yeah, with Brian Jones.
Wow, not many people could say that.
My second concert was Black Sabbath and Cactus in 1970.
Oh,
that's awesome.
Yeah, and and then from that point on, it was nonstop. I was that. What's the name of the movie that Cameron Crowe did?
Almost Famous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was that little boy. I really was. I was 13 years old, sneaking backstage at shows, and literally, going and sneaking backstage and hanging out with bands who came through my hometown.
That's great.
And just standing in the corner and watching it all, and being thrilled and kind of unnoticed, and it was wonderful. That movie was very, very similar to what I was doing when I was a teenager. And
so you knew what you wanted to do basically in life from a very early age. When did you start your first band or pick up your first instrument?
I started playing guitar when I was about 14 years old. And I don't know if I would call it playing guitar. I mean, I was using my thumb to play. And I started to... my first instrument, I think I bought when I was 15. It was a classical guitar, a Yamaha classical guitar, because I loved the Fragile album by Yes. And there was a classical piece on that record that the guitarist did called Mood for a Day.
Right.
And I loved that piece of music. And
that whole album is amazing.
They were Yes, from 1969 through 1977 were innovators and pure magic. They had quite a creative run there, and I saw them many times during that period, and they influenced me quite a bit as far as what a rock show could entail, and how far you could take rock into a mystical world, almost the antithesis of, if you talk about light and dark, like Led Zeppelin were scary, and Yes was almost soothing, and positive, and it was it's also the year 73 when what they first started to call classical rock at the time, when prog bands like Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and King Crimson also all hit their stride at that moment too, and a little before that. But so anyway, Steve Howe and Cat Stevens, the Teaser and the Firecat record, the acoustic playing on that really influenced the way I play guitar. Led Zeppelin 3, all the acoustic songs on that. I think Teaser and the Firecat, Led Zeppelin 3, and all of Led Zeppelin's acoustic music, and trying to play their electric music on a classical guitar. Those were the records.
Those were the main influences, basically.
Yeah, and what Jethro Tull was doing at the time too. Ian Anderson tended to play a lot of acoustic guitar on the long pieces of music that Jethro Tull did, and so I would learn those songs note for note, I recently found a cassette of playing pieces of passion play when I don't know, 13 or 14. Oh no, it had to be 15 years old.
Cool.
Playing, learning the little acoustic segments from passion play, and man, I was like really impressed. I learned them perfectly because I probably played guitar 10 hours a day back then.
Really?
And yeah. I mean, from the time I woke up, I would never, I had my guitar by my side and was, in front of the stereo trying to pick out any pieces I could possibly play. And it's funny, Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull, was kind of overlooked right now at what he did back then. Even as a guitarist and a composer. And unfortunately, the tide of change, kind of washes some people away who don't deserve it, and also washes a lot of crap back on the shore that doesn't deserve to come back on the shore, actually. But that's the way it is, I suppose.
Are you into the more recent material that these artists have put out, such as Yusuf Islam and Jethro Tull?
No.
No.
No, there's something that happened to a lot of, some of my favorite musicians have remained brilliant, and some of them haven't. And I suppose, you can't blame anyone for the life of being on the road for 40 years and what you go through and what it does to your brain. But I suppose there's no excuse. But take, for example, Joe Zawinul from Weather Report.
Mm-hmm.
I think we lost Joe, 2 years ago, and he was 75 years old. I'd seen Weather Report and Joe Zawinul play numerous times from the 70s up until a few years ago. And Joe still played as fresh as ever. What usually happens, especially with keyboard players, is the sounds that they get out of their keyboards are very stale and dated. Mm-hmm. Like they haven't learned how to stay in tune with aesthetics of tone and what tones are applicable to the era we're living in right now. What sounds good and what sounds cliched. Mm-hmm. And up until the last time I saw Joe Zawinul play, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was always mesmerized how great and fresh his solo tones were. They were never some cliched, awful keyboard setting from 1980s that's usually the plague of a lot of great keyboardists. Mm-hmm. It was, so he kept his ears alive and aware of what you need to do to change with the times. I suppose a lot of laziness sets in, and just you get burnt, I suppose, but there are ones who just keep changing and doing it correctly, though. Zawinul did it. Neil Young still does it. Mm-hmm. David Bowie still does it. People who are still aware of what they're doing. Mm-hmm. I suppose is the only way to put it. And the patience. Here's a point that also, when you're a young band, and especially when you're cutting new paths, you're living together in the same house. You don't have children, so you wake up and you're hanging with you're 19 or 25 years old or whatever, and you wake up and you get stoned and start rehearsing, and then you go out and buy beer and come back and keep playing, and you keep playing, and it goes on, and masterpieces occur, and bands evolve, and they learn, and they play hours and hours every day. Then life sets in. You some success comes. You have children, wives, ex-wives, mortgages, houses, bills, 3 cars. Now you're living 40 miles away from your band members because you all have houses in the country. Disputes set in over royalties and who wrote what and who should have gotten how much of what song and whose ideas are being ignored and who's getting most of the publishing. And so all of these factors come in and start to taint the original innocence and spirit that creates great bands. That's the luxury of youth in rock and roll, when your only worry is, how late can we rehearse before the cops come and shut us down, and who's got a little bit of weed so we and something to drink so we can keep going and having fun doing it. Mm-hmm. So age sets in, and along with that, the regular burdens of life set in, and obviously the music becomes affected, and your stamina decreases. You can't do 12-hour rehearsals any longer. When you're 40 years old, and your back starts to ache from having a guitar slung over your shoulder. The personalities of the band, you get on each other's nerves. You can predict what the other person is going to say every minute, And, it just becomes, tedium if you don't do it right. And I think probably the most successful bands or artists are the ones who had the ability to, where one person is the band leader, whether it's Neil Young or David Bowie or Joe Zawinul or, someone who can change the environment around him, bring in new musicians. But it's very rare when a band stays brilliant for decades. I think the last good record the Rolling Stones did was Tattoo You. And how long ago was that, So, there are great songs, one or two songs almost on every old artist that comes out that are worthy, that are great. But making a whole great album when a band has been together that long, that's becoming hard to find, to where the whole record is intriguing and exciting. It's just we're only human.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to say that's definitely not something we could say about you, Chris Goss. But that actually brings me to the next question. We talked a little bit about Masters, and there's another great band that you started only a few years ago, Goon Moon, which we also love, and we played quite a few tracks off on the Jekyll and Hyde show in the past 3 years.
Thanks for doing that.
It is our pleasure. Trust us. Are there any news of this band for the horizon? Anything coming up, perhaps? Because the last album that you put out, Liquor's Last Leg, was brilliant in our opinion, and I think one of the tracks was definitely in our top songs of the decade.
Yeah.
Which track?
Which track? Let me just remember. It was Feel Like This.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Twiggy and I, or Jordy, whatever you want to call him, we have a ball when we make music. We literally spend most of the time laughing, and I think you can hear that on the Goon Moon records.
It's fun. These are both fun records. Exactly.
They're fun, and they have their moments of weirdness too. That kind of, like where it sounds serious for a moment or two, which knocks you off kilter in the right way. And we're dying to do more. It's just scheduling. He rejoined with Marilyn Manson, and that's quite a chore. He's a co-writer with Marilyn too, and it's just a matter of making time for it. And when he was out of Marilyn Manson for a while, he had a lot of time to do it. And I'm off doing something all the time. But believe me, I think that Twiggy and I every day think about, oh shit, man, I wish we could get together to do this. That Liquor's Last Leg, I'm really proud of that record. And Ithacac, the label that put it out, Mike Patton's label, and Greg Workman, who runs the label for Mike Patton, they still call me and tell me how much they love that record, and that it's one of their favorite releases ever. And it's amazing. I think the Goon Moon site has our MySpace site is getting close to 1 million hits now, and it's just been a real pleasure that something that was done for the right reasons, and that was fun, and we had fun working together, that it's still soaking in out there. And I can't imagine what the follow-up would be like, because the circumstance of how that was made and and the amount of, like I said, laughter and carefree attitude while we were making it. I mean, we had no direction. We just did what came up. It was very quirky, and so yeah, I'd love to do another one, and I know Twiggy wants to do another one too, and in fact this conversation after I hang up with you, I'm going to call.
That's good.
That's good.
Yeah,
We'd love to know about any recordings that are coming up by Good Moon as well.
if I hear anything, I'll let you know.
Brilliant.
Awesome.
rest of my life. I wanna feel like this for the rest of my life. It goes on.
Another question about a band that little is known of, the 515ers.
Yeah.
Can you tell us anything about this band? Because there have yet to be any songs that were recorded, as far as I know.
Yeah, well, the only appearance we made was one time at the Arthur Ball,
Mm-hmm.
and it was. You know, it was kind of ragtag, and it was just a side project that Josh and I had talked about doing, and and once again, it's just scheduling.
Mm.
And how many side projects can you possibly have?
That's true. I could say that for both of you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, we'd love to have you in Israel. I mean, I know that you have yet to play here with any of your musical projects. Is that something you would consider?
I'd be honored. I would love to come to Israel. Obviously the history and it's the center of the earth in a way. And I would come over in a heartbeat if God willing.
We also have a lot of desert here.
Yeah, I'd feel right at home. And I remember when Ginger Baker, when he was when he was playing with us, he had came to. I think he went to Israel to perform. And he came back from the trip, and he said he was surprised how green it was. That it was it was very lush and green, and that was intriguing, and it really because when people think of desert, you think of like just sand dunes,
right?
And that's not always true. I mean, I don't live too far from Palm Springs,
Mm-hmm.
and in Palm Springs it's very green and there's mountains with snow on the top of them, that are hovering above this desert, and so it has its own climate system, and it sits on a lot of groundwater. So people have these beautiful lawns and lush flowers and lots of trees, and it's so it. When I first went to Palm Springs for the first time, 20 years ago, I got there and went like, wow, I expected Las Vegas, like kind of a flat, dry expanse of desert. And when I got there, I saw mountains and greenery. Mm. And so and when Ginger got back from Israel, he described it the same way. And so I would love to come to Jerusalem. I mean, obviously, I was raised as a Catholic, and so a lot of the philosophy that was, and all this that I have obviously, it might show in the music, but philosophy and theology are two of my favorite subjects. And to actually come there and see where a lot of it originated, I think would be such an honor and a privilege.
I think we'd definitely be honored if you came here, and we would love to show you around as well if you would need any help.
Sure.
Well, I may take you up on that, buddy.
Right, no problem with that. I want to know
where the good restaurants are.
No problem. There's no problem with that. I'd like to thank you for this wonderful interview, Chris. It was definitely an honor for us, and we look up to you and your music for years. So thanks a lot, first off the bat. And we're looking forward to many great years of music in the future. We would like to wish you a wonderful weekend, Chris. And again, thanks a lot.
All right.
Thank you.
You were brilliant. You too. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Little child sitting there, come on down to the county fair. Out on the highest child.